What If, Season 1, Episode 5. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marvel Plus, the podcast devoted solely to the Disney Plus Marvel series. My name is Brett Scott. I am your host, and this, if you can't tell, is the show. Big show this week for Episode 5. Episode 5 already. This series is like flying by. Episode 5 of What If today, and we've got Dave Horrocks from Comics in Motion and from the VHS Strikes Back here to discuss it. But not only do we talk about the big zombies episode of What If, we also dig into Shang-Chi, and we even talk a little bit about the new Matrix Resurrections trailer. So sit down, strap in, get ready for takeoff. Here we go. You know him, you love him. From across the pond, I bring you Mr. Dave Horrocks. Mr. Dave Horrocks, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here, Brett. Always good to speak to you. Excited. We've talked about this episode, haven't we, for a little while, and good to finally get it onto the screens and then, get onto the mic. I've been chomping at the bit for this one.
Yeah. When I first started reaching out to people, for the What If series, there was one thing everyone kept asking, right? They're like, "Can I do the zombies episode?" everyone wanted to do it. Like, and I'm not familiar with the zombies comics, so I'm like, all right. I guess it must be really good. But you were the first, Dave. You fertilized the egg. You were the strongest, fastest swimmer, and you're the chosen one. So you're here to talk some MCU zombies.
Yeah, quickest off the trigger.
That's it.
I won't bring up a euphemism there, but okay, sorry, go on.
So before we jump into the actual episode, I was going to ask you about something else. Did you catch that Matrix 4 trailer?
Oh, I absolutely did.
What did you make of that? Did you like it? I thought it was awesome.
Well, I don't know how I feel about it yet. Am I going to be there in the first week? Absolutely. So,
yeah.
And to give a bit of context to that, so back in '99, cast your mind back, Brett, all of the hype was around Star Wars: A Phantom Menace. And I was so excited that we were going to see, the start of the journey. We were going to see how, Anakin Skywalker descended to become Darth Vader. And basically, it was a massive letdown. For me personally, I know there's actually weirdly quite a lot of love in recent years for the prequels. I feel like people are remembering them a little bit more fondly than certainly I do. But the surprise hit of that year was The Matrix, and that absolutely blew my mind. I thought it was fantastic, loved it. And then when you had things like the Animatrix come out, which, these were all kind of manga type stories that basically filled out that universe, and then of course you've got academics actually talking about, well, we've got a 50-50 chance that we are in a Matrix type situation. I loved it. The sequels for me personally were a bit of a letdown. It went from kind of this struggle against an oppressive artificial intelligence to, well, this is all deterministic and that it all happened before. So, I prefer to think of The Matrix as that 99 movie, and then that's it. I draw a line under what happened after. But going back to this trailer, like I say, I'd love to get back into that world. I mean, the fact that you've got Keanu Reeves there and he looks a bit, it's basically John Wick does The Matrix, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't help but feel that they're going to Force Awakens this. Because the trailer, even some of the shots, you've got on top of the skyscraper, you've got Neo, who's clearly confused. He doesn't realize he's in a Matrix again. You got Trinity in there. It just feels like a remake of the first one. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but that's essentially for me what they did with Force Awakens. They just looked at New Hope. They provided us with the same beats in a kind of slightly updated context, and that's what I think we're going to get with Matrix 4. What about you?
Well, kind of agree with you about the look of the trailer, about how it looks like that's kind of what they might do. But you also have to remember, this is the Matrix. I mean, this was like one of the biggest kind of twists in movie history. This is like a massive, like, when it happened, we were like, there's never been anything like this before. This is an incredible idea, like brought to life on the screen. And I just have a feeling that there's something in their back pocket, like there's something that's wildly different about this one that's going to make it like a different thing. I don't think you can ever really capture what the original Matrix did again, because you've already seen the strings, you know what it's about, right? So there must be something about this version that makes it important that the audience already knows what's going on.
Mm,
Because I remember when I saw the first Matrix, I had no idea. I had no idea that he was in a simulation. I didn't know that's what it was about. So I go in, and I'm a teenager at this point. I think I went to the drive-in movie theater, which is something you guys just got over there. Um,
yep.
uh, that's a pastime here. So it's like it was something we would do. I don't know, a few weekends every summer, probably as a family. And then when I got a little older, it became where you would take a date and things like that. But when we went, I think with my parents and a friend. So I must have been, I don't know, 99. I would have been 15. Okay, so yeah, I had no idea what it was about. It blew me away, right? And I don't know, was that most people's experience with the film? Like going in, did we know from the trailer or anything? Like
No.
any idea what was going on? Okay.
No, and a friend of mine saw it before I did, and he just said, "You need to watch this." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, what's it about?" It says, "I can't tell you, just watch
Yeah.
it." So I just assumed this was a regular Keanu Reeves romp, from basically 91-ish when he's in like Point Break, wasn't he? He was in Speed and things like that. So he'd established himself as an action star, and I just thought it was from the trailers. You just see the stuff of him in the Matrix. You see him in his Mr. Anderson persona, and so
Yeah.
when that all starts to unfold, it's a Kaiser Soze moment, isn't it? It's like holy shit, and it just blew my mind, and probably for the next decade, I was just obsessed with it. The whole idea. I don't know about yourself, but I had the Matrix screensaver for the longest time. I just love it, that first one.
Yeah, no, I really did love it. And I think I came to appreciate it even more later, actually. So, like you said, for the next 10 years, you were really obsessed with it. I'd probably like 5 years later, I got really back into it and just like started watching. And I did enjoy the sequels. I know I kind of agree with you in the terms of I don't like anything being deterministic in any of the media that I watch. Like, even with when we were talking the Loki series a while back, it started to bother me a little bit when they would talk about like, oh, well, this is predetermined. You can't really change certain things and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then even in the What If series a couple weeks ago or last week, when the Doctor Strange, when they were talking about there was certain things that you can't change, right? These fixed
Mm,
points on the timeline,
yeah.
and even that kind of bothered me. So yeah, I get what you're saying about that part, and I wonder if they're going to do a twist on that in this version of like this, because it's not. I don't think it can't be a reboot, right? You can never reboot the Matrix just because of that revelation. You can't put the what they call it? You can't put the Jack back in the box, right?
Yeah, and
There's
it still looks so great, doesn't it? It's still, I personally, I love that kind of uh, 90s goth music. And I watched it again last year, and I just think it looks fantastic. So there's no reason at all to reboot it, apart from, well, trying to squeeze the pips and out of it and make some more money.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And like I said, I don't think you lose a lot trying to reboot that one. Like, it'd be like if they did an actual kind of, like, I get how the beats are kind of the same, what you're saying, and maybe for a new generation that could happen, but I don't think so. I think even, the next few generations are aware of the Matrix. Like, I don't think my kids have watched it yet. Um, but I'm sure the generation right before them have watched it. Anyone who's an adult right now is probably pretty familiar with what the Matrix is, or at least the idea of it. It's like the Sixth
Mm.
Sense, right?
Yeah, it's almost like it's permeated pop culture as well, hasn't it? If you see a black cat, you get a bit
Mhm.
of deja vu. It's a glitch in the matrix. There are certain things that even people who maybe aren't that familiar with the movie kind of pick up on these little sayings and things. I think just the time in the dojo. It's all just so reminiscent of the first one. Now it could
Yeah,
be that it is a play, or a bit of it is a play-by-play remake of the first one almost. Neo is in the Matrix, he doesn't know it, he suddenly finds out, he learns kung fu, but then something different happens. This plays out differently. Maybe that's the twist. That's the thing that they're going to hit us with, and all the footage is from like the first 15 minutes of the movie.
yeah. It very well could be just like the first film.
Hmm.
We were like confused about what was going on. All right. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And I hope, much like you, that they do not just do a soft reboot of the franchise. I would hate that. Um, but one other thing I wanted to ask you about, and kind of moving back towards Marvel, was, have you had a chance to see Shang-Chi?
Absolutely. I loved it. Absolutely
And
loved
and
it.
and be honest, 6 months ago, did you pronounce it Shang-Chi?
I think I probably still do. Shang-Chi, Shang-Chi. I'll blame it on
Yeah,
my
yeah.
Britishness.
Well, I've got nothing to blame because, yeah, I think most other fans probably called it Shang-Chi. But you find out, I think Kevin Feige, when he was announcing the film, what, 2 years ago or something, a year and a half ago, pronounced it Shang-Chi. And I was like, what is this? So, and I know I didn't. I'm like, I'm gonna keep pronouncing it the way I pronounce it. That's just how it's gonna be. But then I go see the film, and every reference to the character is Shang-Chi, Shang-Chi. So I'm a convert now. Now I call it Shang-Chi like everyone else. Um, but what did you think? What did you think of the film?
I thought it was really good. I mean, you mix in a bit of Marvel with some kung fu, I'm in. I'm so in. And I thought they did a really good job. I thought it was probably closest to Black Panther in that, it was an origin movie, but it was also a world building movie as well. We did have some nods. We had the Abomination in there, spoilers as well, loads of spoilers.
Mhm.
Are we spoiling
So,
everything? I'll try not to spoil everything, but it's in the trailer, so that seems like fair game. We had
mhm.
Abomination, we had Wong in there. I don't think you could quite make him out, so maybe that is a spoiler. So you've got those nods that it is in the Marvel universe.
Right.
Um, but I just thought it was a great job. I thought they nailed the humor very
Hmm.
well. The action I thought was fantastic, the fight scenes and everything. And there are a few little twists and turns around what exactly happened in his past to bring him to where he is today. The stuff with his sister, of course, and yeah, I thought it does the old Marvel thing, doesn't it? Oh no, I'm not going to say that because that would be a spoiler. But yeah, no, I thought it's about as good as it could have been. It didn't blow me away the same way, say, Guardians of the Galaxy did when I saw that. I had such low expectations for that,
Hmm.
but I do love a good
Yeah.
kung fu movie anyway. So, my expectations were a bit higher. And yeah, let's put it one way: it's a lot damn better than Iron Fist.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, a lot of people's complaints about the MCU, if they have any, is that it's formulaic. You know, every film is pretty much the same. At least every origin film and every team film, they play out in the same way. Now, this one I feel like does enough different to not feel as formulaic. Like, you know, first of all, the theme of it's very much a kung fu film in the Marvel universe. It is the fight choreography. It's different than what we've seen before. It's not a Falcon and the Winter Soldier type fight choreography, right? It's not a Captain America Civil War or Winter Soldier fight choreography. Very different. Very you know, Chinese influenced kung fu film.
Hmm.
And I thought it felt like a mix between kind of a 90s Jackie Chan film and I don't know, like Jet Li's Hero. You
Mm.
know, it was a very good combination of this like fast action sequences where they use the background. I love that. That was probably my favorite part. Very much Jackie Chan-esque, who, you know, always did his own stunts or
Mm.
supposedly always did his own stunts. And um, I love that when they use things in the background, the props in the background as part of the fight. Um, but yeah, I thought this film it felt enough different to hopefully, you know, make those people who don't like the formulaic nature of the MCU films maybe make them happy a little bit. Now I have heard some detractors. There's been a couple people I've talked to who don't really enjoy the film. I'm not seeing it. I don't think it's the best thing the MCU's put out, but I mean it's up there in the top half. I mean I at least it's an 8 or above on a 10 scale for me.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there are some people who are just not going to like the Marvel movies no
Hmm.
matter what they do. I think, if people are saying, and people do, I've heard it myself, that it's a bit cookie cutter, it's formulaic. It's a pretty damn good formula, to be honest. But I don't think it's
Yes.
Marvel who's created this formula. They're all the hero's journey. That's what they are. They establish in the first act, they'll introduce some conflict in the second act, and then they'll resolve it in the third act.
Yeah.
That's bigger than Marvel,
Yeah.
but people
Oh
want to
yeah.
just because they make consistently high quality movies. I think people are just looking for stuff, and if people don't like it, okay, fine, don't like it. But I think they're searching for reasons a lot of the time because I mean, you name me a comic book, a superhero based movie that isn't a hero's journey. I
Yeah.
think they're pretty much all that three-act structure, aren't they?
Yeah, I think name just about any story, book, film, anything, like most of them play on the hero's journey.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, even you go to like a romantic comedy, almost it sets up the same beats, right? You meet the characters, they come into some kind of conflict. In the middle, they get into some sort of fight. They come to some sort of head where they don't think they can get past it, and then in the end, they find a resolution. Like the hero comes back home and makes everything right. So yeah, it's like that across all media. I feel like that's probably the most popular type of story that there is out there. So yeah, and that's just classic literature right there. So
Hmm.
I agree. I agree. I think all films follow close to this formula, and people's problems with the Marvel films might just be because they're all about literal superheroes. They're all literally the hero's journey, and there's so damn many of the films. But you're right. If it's formulaic, it's a pretty damn good formula. They keep using it for a reason. It's working every single time.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the other superhero comic book superhero movies or franchises, let me put it that way, I can't
Mm.
think of one that comes anywhere near to what Marvel have done. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the first two X-Men. I think after that, things like Logan and Days of Future Past are good as well. But that franchise was incredibly spotty and hit and miss a lot of the time. You look at the DC movies, a lot of those, they seem to have more hits and misses in recent years, but before that, again, very, very patchy. So I can't think of another equivalent franchise. And we all have our favorites. Not everything, I think you said last week, not everything is great, but
Right.
the way it all knits together is admirable at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I think no one's ever done that before. So to continue to make movies that I personally enjoy them all. I could sit there if I had the time. I'd sit there quite happily and watch from start, from Iron Man all the way through.
Yeah.
And not everyone does. So I think if you're on the train now, you're on the train. If you're not, you're not. So there are probably detractors for Shang-Chi. There you go. I said it properly, probably.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice, nicely done.
but I kind of feel like someone's going to have something negative to say no matter what's produced.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. All right. We've eaten up almost, half your time here talking about everything but
So much
the
fun though,
what if
isn't it?
series.
All of it. I love it.
Yeah. So now this episode of What If, this is the fifth episode. And now there were some supposed leaks early on that gave us the episode order, and I almost bought into it. I almost bought into it, but they started to veer from this list a little bit. So now I think it's up in the air. We don't know what's coming next week. But one thing that's for sure, it's probably going to try to be even darker because the series has gotten gradually darker from the first episode, which there wasn't much to it. There wasn't much. Um, they didn't veer too much from the Captain America First Avenger story. It didn't end in a wildly different way than the first Avenger, and it didn't really go to a dark place. It didn't end on a negative cliffhanger like a lot of
Hmm.
these last two have. So, what have you thought of the series up until this one?
I've enjoyed it, and I think it is very, very deliberate how they've done this. They've kind of introduced us to the concept. They deviated a little bit in that first episode, but then they did change, a good number of things. It wasn't just about Agent Carter becoming Captain America and then playing out the beats of that we saw in First Avenger. The impact of her making that one decision to stay down where Steve was going to go through the whole experiment, the whole process. The Tommy Lee Jones character gets killed off, doesn't he? And that sort of happens as well. So you end up with this douchebag general who clearly doesn't like women, and he's playing a bigger part. So the ripples were there, but essentially it was a different version of First Avenger. And then in the second one as well, I thought they started to deviate a little bit more. So you had this charismatic Star Lord, that when T'Challa takes the role, the turn with Thanos, not going through with the whole genocide, and I love the way they were ribbing him about it. Um,
Yeah,
that you see that okay, it's not just him, being Star Lord and being popular. Actually, for what we saw in that whole Infinity Saga, it had a massive implication in this universe.
yeah,
So I think that deviated a bit more. And then I must admit, when I watched it last week, it was my favorite episode where things did take a turn, because this is what the comics were about. It always took a darker turn. It always ended up worse than it did in the original 616 universe, because ultimately they were one issue, more or less throwaway stories, so they could do anything they wanted with the characters, and
yes,
usually it didn't go so well. So that's how it sort of played out. And then with the Doctor Strange one, he destroyed that universe. So you can't get too much darker than that. So
right,
yeah, I've liked the way they've introduced us, got us on board with the concept, and now they seem to be ramping it up with each episode and making it darker and darker.
Yeah, and in my opinion, better and better, right? Like each episode, not only the darker it gets, the better this thing gets. And I never thought I would really necessarily say that about the MCU, which is, you know, there's been some dark moments, but it's somewhat lighthearted. There's a lot of comedy, and um, it was just like that second episode. Like it was a pretty happy-go-lucky episode of What If. But yeah, man, the darker they get, the more they veer from what we're used to in the MCU, the more I'm enjoying this series. And I'm hoping that this bleeds into, in a big way, into the other films to come. You know, the Spider-Man film, if it for sure ends up being a multiverse film, and then obviously the multiverse of madness. I'm hoping that this series will affect that. Like maybe we'll see
Hmm.
some of these pop up. I've heard people say it, and I kind of thought it when I watched the Doctor Strange episode that, you know, the fact that Doctor Strange acts very different and almost kind of looks different in the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer.
Mm.
That maybe there's a possibility he's a variant. Maybe he's even this dark Strange. Like maybe he's that version of Doctor Strange. I don't think so because he seems a little too jovial to be that one. But maybe he's a version of Doctor Strange.
Well, I'm sure you must have seen one of the theories is that he's Mephisto.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm
That's
not sure if that's a serious suggestion or just a mocking of obviously where everyone was with WandaVision and waiting for him every single episode. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's not just kind of throwaway, is it? Because that's who did the whole brand new day thing in the comics. So I don't know. He does seem a little bit off, doesn't he? So I would love for this series to play into the main MCU. I don't know how it does it, but quite honestly, with this one, I thought they were just going to replay the Robert Kirkman run on Marvel Zombies, that first volume, and they didn't. The only thing really is you saw T'Challa with half his leg missing. That does appear in the comics, but almost everything else was quite different.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about because I haven't read the comics. I was going to ask you. I know that you're a fan of them because you were one of the people, the first person to ask about the zombies episode. You're like, hey, if there's any episode that you're to set aside, I'd love to do the zombie episode. So there must have been something in that comic book that you enjoyed. So that's what I wanted to ask you. Is it wildly different than that version?
Yeah, I mean the things that are the same are basically you've got the heroes that we know and love are all zombies and they've still got use of their powers, but the kind of story, the way it plays out is a bit different. Like I say, the reason I tried it out was because it was Robert Kirkman, so writer creator for The Walking Dead, and
Yes.
just playing in the what we with our Marvel characters, and I was just taken by how brutal it was. And the thing that they don't do in this animated series is the horrible twist of it all is the whatever the infection is to turn them into zombies. When they
Yeah.
feed on someone, they get their kind of original personality back. So it's
Oh.
they have that remorse. They're basically they'll feed on someone and then they're like, oh no, I can't believe it. What have I become? Kind of thing. And I think that is such a cruel twist on the whole zombie genre. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's even in the first episode you have Magneto, and what I haven't read, these first appeared in Ultimate Fantastic Four. It was Mark Millar who kind of created them. I haven't actually read that. I really should, but it was the Robert Kirkman run that I started off with, and basically Magneto comes in and you think he's gonna save everyone, and you get these brutal panels where they eventually catch up with him and they're tearing his intestines out and everything, and it is absolutely brutal but brilliant stuff.
Yeah, this is something now that I've seen this episode, I'm gonna have to go back and dig into that Kirkman uh, run of the comics. And I was surprised to find out that I thought the Marvel Zombies was a short-lived like a little like a mini, and that it turns out that it was actually an ongoing at a point.
No, I think, I mean, that first run by Kirkman, I'm sure it's about 6 issues or something like that, but they've
Okay.
had different volumes, so they'll term
Okay.
that like volume one, so you could get that in a trade. Um,
Yeah.
but then Howard the Duck and Machine Man paired up in one with Jocasta, and so there's been loads more stories, and you've had Deadpool, who had his head chopped off and he became Headpool. You got a zombie head of Deadpool and stuff. It's
Yeah, very much along the lines of the Paul Rudd puns in this
yeah,
episode.
yeah. Well, I actually thought Paul Rudd was a bit more Futurama. I thought that's where they got
Yes.
got the inspiration for that one.
Hmm. So, what did you think about, since you kind of told me the way that they did some of the stuff in the comics? What did you think about the explanation in this one for how everyone was infected? So we find out that Hank Pym actually was infected when he went to rescue his wife, and he was bitten, and then comes back, and that's how they did it. It wasn't like that in the comics, right?
Mm, I don't know if they even explained it in the comics how it started. I think you just join and some of the heroes are infected and eating
Mm.
people, and then you just get other heroes that try and counter it, and then they end up getting bitten as well, and then they become part of the whole zombie force. And it's something that they did in The Walking Dead as well. I don't know, I've not read it for a few years now, but certainly in the first 100 or so issues they never explained what caused the zombie virus. So I think I know in the TV show they kind of hinted at it a little bit in one of the episodes, but I
Hmm.
don't think I'm trying to think back now. I really don't think they explained it. And I think, I don't need it to be explained. So they didn't spend too long on it, did they? It was all kind of it was in the quantum realm and something happened and it's all a bit weird in there anyway. So
Right.
it's a nice little thing. I prefer my zombies to be created by military experiments.
Of course. Yeah.
Trying to create some weaponized virus or something like that, and it gets wrong, it gets out of contamination. If you've got a zombie trope, that's the one that I like.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing, and what, like I said, I didn't read the comics, so I had no idea what to expect. Um, I've seen visuals of it. I've seen random panels from it, but that's it. And I thought it looked amazing. And so that's what I was looking for in this series. But to come in here and to find out that all of the zombies still have their original powers, and that's kind of what makes them so formidable. Like these aren't just regular zombies. I mean, if they were regular zombies versus people with powers and enhanced humans, I don't think it would be so scary. But the fact that we've got these Avengers running around with not only like a ravenous desire to feed on people, but on top of that, they have all of their original powers too. And so, yeah, I guess that's what makes this interesting. So I wouldn't be much of a story otherwise, but
Yeah,
yeah, I,
absolutely. And
I like that.
without wanting to spoil, I mean, it's been out for years and years now, that original run, but I mean, essentially, they exhaust the planet's supply of humans, so they have to go and try and hop universes. Because
Mhm.
basically, if you think about it, if all the superheroes and supervillains, they can all team up now, can't they? Because they've got one goal, and that's to feed on human beings. I mean, your average human basically has no chance.
Yeah. So so what did you think of the cast of characters they decided to use, like the people who weren't infected? You had Happy Hogan in there. Was not expecting that. Um, Spider-Man, Banner, Hawkeye's there, Sharon Carter, Okoye naturally is in a zombie apocalypse. Um,
Yeah.
but what do you think about the way they did that? Like which characters they decided to use and which ones were already zombies when we started out?
I couldn't help but think that this is a cast made up of who was available.
Mm,
It doesn't represent any kind of team that I am familiar with from the comics. One thing I that did occur to me is that Hope Van Dyne seems to be playing a much bigger role in these kind of pocket universes. You know, she played all right, she wasn't in, but she was a big plot point in last week.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh, Sorry, it wasn't last week, was it? It was the week before that with
right.
the whole who killed the Avengers. So
Yes.
and then she plays a big part in this as well, and so I don't know. I think on that team, there's obviously they're big fans of the Wasp.
Yeah, it leads you to believe that she might play some major role. I mean, we have that Quantum Mania film coming up. I mean, it's a ways off, but you have to imagine that maybe something big happens with her, or maybe on the way to that film, something big happens with her. So yeah, it seems like they really are zeroing in on that character, like making you aware of her again. Like, hey, this character matters. This is going to matter in the MCU.
Mm,
Whereas she hadn't really been brought into other films before. We just saw her in the Ant-Man films.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, that there is a big contingent of Ant-Man influence, isn't there? So you've got Hope, you got obviously Scott Lang as Paul Rudd ending up as the head there. You've even got Kurt there for his
Yeah,
mate. So you've got an influence there. You've also got, I mean, there's not a lot of superpowered individuals in this team, is there? You've got Sharon, you've got Okoye, you've got Happy Hogan. So it's an interesting choice.
yeah, and I think that makes it more challenging, and it makes it for better storytelling. Because if you had someone that was really, say Wanda, which we'll get to that little twist
Mm,
here in a minute. Say Wanda was not a zombie, she could very easily decimate, fields of zombies, no
yeah.
problem. So that might get a bit boring, but yeah, I like that. I like that they used, at the best, enhanced individuals like a Spider-Man, a mutate, rather than like someone with, an omega level uh adversary for these zombies.
Yeah, like Captain Marvel in the
Right.
MCU. It'd just be too much, wouldn't it? And
Yes.
I'd have to turn the question around on you. I mean, what do you think about just adding in the cloak of levitation in there as well?
Yeah, it was kind of cool that it had a separate, obviously it's a different thing. It's not Doctor Strange, but
Hmm.
it's interesting to see it without Doctor Strange to play on, and that it's its own character.
Hmm.
Um, I enjoyed it. I thought that was pretty cool, and that Spider-Man used it throughout. And I love the Spider-Man line from Harry Potter.
Remind me, which one was that?
That I don't know that I can't say it, Dave. You put me on the spot. The
Sorry.
in Guardium Leviosa, right?
Oh, right, right, okay.
He drops that line in the episode. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great. They're bringing in some other genre films in here. But and it was perfect for Spider-Man, who is obsessed with
Pop culture,
films.
isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought that was pretty cool. What what did you make though of the this thing was full of twists actually throughout. Like
Mm.
um I don't know about twists, but bombshells, that big drops like, oh, they didn't realize that was going on. So we get Vision coming in is seemingly, he's going to save the day. He's figured out a way to maybe reverse this virus. He's got a little base of his own he brings the characters back to. And the big twist is that he's storing a very hungry Wanda who's about to eat Black Panther and ready to eat the rest of this ragtag team. What did you make of that? Like Wanda as a zombie.
It comes back to what we were saying before about the power level. You sort of think, well, that's the worst of all worlds, isn't it? Especially in the MCU, in the WandaVision series, you started to see how powerful she was, and I don't know what it was, but when they came across Vision, I did have a feeling that all was not what it appears. I mean, again, we've seen it plenty in The Walking Dead, haven't we? Where, they
Hmm.
think they're going to some sanctuary and then it turns out they want to eat them all, or something like that. And I just didn't really trust Vision's kind of intent there. But I mean, even when it came, even though I had my suspicions, when it did come, it was kind of like, oh shit,
Yeah.
this is not going to go well. And I guess to your point earlier, I guess it makes it better, doesn't it, when you've got those um, lesser powered heroes. You've only got Spider-Man, who's got Bruce Banner as well, but the likes of Sharon Carter, even Bucky Barnes, they're not kind of these massively overpowered individuals. So I thought it was great, and in the comics, basically, T'Challa's being held by Hank Pym. He's being held by Ant-Man essentially, and what he's doing again, like I say, when he eats or when all of them eat, they kind of get their normal brain back, if you like. And he realized that he was going to exhaust the supply, so he was keeping T'Challa uh, alive and basically eating him a bit at a time,
Uh,
which is horrendous,
yeah,
And
that's brutal.
so when you saw his leg missing, that's exactly how he appears in the comics as well. So no, I thought it was a great twist with Wanda.
And we mentioned just how gruesome that is to be feeding on someone, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so dark for the MCU. And what did you make about how gory this episode was? Because that was one of the things that made it so dark. Like it wasn't as thematically dark maybe as the Doctor Strange one, which is a little more like cerebral dark,
Hmm.
but visually very dark and if it's not the darkest episode, it's definitely the goriest episode that we'll probably ever see in the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, oh, it would be great to see this live action though, wouldn't it? I mean, when they kind of the Bucky throws the shield, I think it's Bucky, isn't it? And then essentially cutting Captain America in half,
Yes.
and you're like, holy shit. Now,
Yeah.
I think what I'd say, I do enjoy the animation style. It's something a little bit different to what I've seen before. But I kind of feel for a zombies cartoon. I'd like the animation style to be a bit dirtier, a bit grittier, a bit more that
Mhm.
old pencil sort of style. I just felt it was a bit too clean with the animation style. So it was great, it was gory, but just that slight change in style, I think it would have benefited from it. Just give it that dirtier, gritty zombie apocalypse feel.
I agree. From what I've seen from the comics, that looks much better. You know,
Yeah.
it's fantastic art, and yeah, you're right. It's this this animation style that they're using is a little more brightly colored, a little bit more clean lined. It's like it's it doesn't fit quite as well as something like what we saw in the comics.
Yeah.
I thought that was much better. Um, so we've got a lot of characters sacrificing themselves throughout this. First of all, I wanted to bring this up because you said about the cat being cut in half, which was like to me was like the first really like, oh, that was an awesome zombie death, right? Just like you're on The Walking Dead. You know how on The Talking Dead they go back and they replay every zombie and every character that died throughout.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that was an awesome replayable moment. I thought it was really cool. And but the very next scene though, we get Hope going inside of what I don't remember which character it was. Uh,
Oh,
and
I'm trying to think now myself. Because she
it was
made
Sha-
she.
it was Sharon, wasn't it? Sharon Carter, maybe.
Oh, it was a couple of days ago. I watched it now, and my mind's gone blank. But I just remember her, getting back to normal size, and
Ah,
hopefully she kept her mouth closed at that point. It was
yeah,
fairly gruesome, though, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah. To go from that cap scene right to that one. I'm like, oh man, this is getting nasty. I like this a lot. Uh, so she gets injured in the process, right? She's got a scratch during this
Yeah.
whole getaway. Which what they're doing now is, Vision has kind of realized the error of his ways. which I didn't understand. Like, why now would he understand the error of his
Mm.
ways? Not when he's feeding T'Challa
Yeah.
to the zombie. Like, he didn't recognize it then. Like, man, this is wrong. But he realizes the error of his way. He decides to help them, and really, I feel like he was kind of to your point with the characters we have not really being powered, very powered. He was kind of the only chance they had against Wanda, and to slow her
Mm.
down a little bit. So it's smart that they used him for this character, right? But a lot of people sacrificing themselves. So Hope gets the little nick on her shoulder, and so she's like, "Well, I'm going out anyway." She does the thing where she grows really big and carries them across the herd of zombies, which I thought was pretty cool. But the best thing was the Hulk, right? Like, Banner can't change. He can't change. He can't change. And we think it might play out like Infinity War, where he just can't change. And that's just how it's going to be. But no, the very end, he forces himself to change by just running full force into a herd of zombies and hulking out. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. No, it was good. And again, yeah, we didn't talk about the beginning. It was basically the start of Infinity War, wasn't it? But
Yeah.
no one was around. Again, that's why that's what I think is good, how he just drops into that zombie
Hmm.
apocalypse world. We don't see the start of it. We don't see Patient Zero until a little bit later on. But yeah, again in the comics, Hulk is infected. He becomes one of the zombies, and I can't remember who he eats, but he eats someone big, and then you've got a foot or something sticking out of his stomach because when he shrinks down to Bruce Banner, it's he hasn't digested him yet.
Uh,
Utterly gruesome stuff.
so one thing you just mentioned was how they basically replayed Infinity War in that at the beginning, and they've been doing this in every episode. They've been doing some sort of callback, which is like, oh, this is the time period we're in, this is the world we're in, to kind of get the audience into the setting. And it's been really, really good the way that they've exactly recreated some of the shots, but
Hmm.
in animation form. Like the beginning of this with the coming in from above the city, right? And they did like the
Yeah.
the tilting camera angle. That was so awesome. And just the way he crashes through the window at Bleecker Street. Like I just thought the way that they're creating or recreating basically the films, they're doing such a good job that it looks, even though it's animation, just like the film.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I mean, this is made. It's a cliche, isn't it? But it's made by fans for fans, I think. It's one of those where if you're not on board, I think Marvel, well, yeah, Marvel and Disney, basically what they've done with all of these Disney Plus series, so WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, they're almost saying like, if you haven't caught up, we're not that bothered about you. We're not going to catch you up because
Yeah.
you're probably not that interested. If you're not interested now, we're not going to convince you. So this is for the fans. This is for everyone who loves the MCU. And even people who love to hate it, still watch it, but still love to criticize it. But even then, it's for people who know this universe and will recognize those kind of little callbacks, and it will feel familiar. It's like even if someone's like a casual fan and has seen the movies but doesn't necessarily, jump onto podcasts about them,
Right. Right.
you'll still recognize like the start there when Bruce Banner's saying, Thanos is coming, and even if you can't think where have I seen that? Oh, I'm sure I've seen that before. So yeah, I love the way they've done that. The way it's like, look, this is for you. We're not trying to get new people on board. We're just trying to, make sure the people who are on board get what they want.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure, there's never enough money to be had, but there's certainly enough fans to make make Endgame the most lucrative film of all time. So they've got plenty of fans. You're right. Uh, one thing that I think is really cool is that it's almost like the MCU is becoming the old comic books in the sense of in the culture, right? So even though the MCU is now, basically comic books in a way have come to pop culture. It's not
Hmm.
like this subculture anymore. It is popular culture. You see it in every department store that you go into. You see it everywhere. Like I just saw the other day a car driving by that was completely Hulk themed. It was a green car. The windows had Hulk in it. The license plate said like Hulk out or something. It was it's really cool to see. But as you're saying, the way that they're not as worried about people who haven't gotten on board yet. It's just like the comic books, right? Like you've got these in jokes, you've got these things that only the people who know about this know about, and everyone else is kind of left behind. And that it kind of gives the feel of being into comic books back in the day. Only other people who read the comic books knew, you know, the cool stuff that was going on. Those are the only people you could talk to about it. It's much bigger now because it is pop culture, but it's still a subset of people. Like not everyone on earth are watching these films.
Hmm.
So like my wife, for example, has no idea what's going on in the MCU. She has no like she couldn't care less about it.
Hmm.
But I can jump on here with you and talk for an hour about a single half-hour episode of a series. So it's really cool that it's like the MCU has taken the place of comics for that creating a subculture within culture. I think it's pretty neat that and the more they do it, the more that they refer back to themselves,
Hmm.
to earlier films, earlier series, the the more and more special it gets for the people who are on board.
Yeah, because I think the main thing the comics have done, and like you say with the MCU, they'll tell the stories, and you've got that subculture, like you say. The main thing they have to do is just avoid screwing up the all of the merchandising because, whatever happens in the movies, not everyone, like you say, is going to watch it, but if they did something particularly bad with Spider-Man, and made him a murderer or something like that, it's like, oh, suddenly we can't sell our Spider-Man lampshades, or you know what I mean? It's like there's a huge amount of money to be made just in the iconography, just in the selling of different merchandise, like bed covers and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But in terms of, people being au fait with the stories, you're absolutely right. I think the other difference though is, the and I think this is one of the reasons some people rebel against them, but like in the MCU isn't a shameful thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, comics, I mean, it's a bit different now, but it's always been a bit, what, you read comics, what, you're like 8 years old. Um, there was always that kind of attitude from people outside that culture, wasn't there?
Yeah, even, and it went beyond that. I mean, you know, people who liked Star Wars, even as big as that was, you were still, if you were like really into Star Wars, even 10 years ago, before this next set of films came out, the sequel films came out, um, you were kind of seen as a geek, for being into like man, you were really into Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever it might be. It was like this nerd culture, right? This geek culture. But yeah, this has become a lot more mainstream. But I also think we're a bit in an echo chamber, right? I
Echo
feel
chamber,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I feel like we think things are maybe much bigger and more known than they are because we constantly talk about it and see people like obviously a lot of people are seeing the films, but not everybody is seeing the films. We got people like my wife. She's not alone in the fact that she's like, I'm not into this superhero thing. This she calls me a geek all the time. She's like, I can't get so into all that stuff. Um, but
Can
you
I
know, it.
can I
Go
just
ahead.
give you an example? So, when there was all the build up to Zack Snyder's Justice League, I feel like that was one of the biggest examples where all of, the people like us who are really into the movies and, whether it's DC, Marvel, something else, independent, it was really big news, wasn't it? It was this whole movement of fans and really wanted this
Right.
director's cut to happen. And it was so exciting, the build up. But you go outside of that bubble, outside of that echo chamber, and people are
Yeah.
like, what? This came out a few years ago, didn't it? Is this just a director's cut? Am I going to see, 30 extra seconds of footage?
Right.
And I can't remember where I heard it now, but I was listening to one, and he said his boss was asking about it and said, "Is Thanos in this one?"
Yes, and that's how it is. Like my wife constantly mixes up Marvel with DC. Sometimes she mixes up Marvel with Star Wars. So it's like, I think that we do.
No, that's just wrong.
I know. I think that we think we're bigger than we are, and maybe we can just embrace it. It's a little bit bigger. Okay, it's quite a bit bigger than it used to be. Um, the fandom, but I think we can still say that we're into something that not everyone's into. It's still special enough, and especially with the MCU, the way they keep referring back to older films and stuff, like you have to be into it to get it. And like I couldn't imagine being a casual fan or someone who missed a good portion of the films trying to watch these series. There's no way. There's no way.
Mm,
Like what if, maybe what if, but the other series would make zero sense to me. Like what's going on? I thought Loki was dead. I thought, like
yeah.
why is Vision here? He died in the last movie I saw. Like, so yeah, I do. I still feel like it's still a club. It's still a club.
I kind of feel though that the people who don't know and haven't kept up probably don't care enough. And let's
Yeah.
face it, when Avengers Assemble came out in 2012, a few of us thought like, well, hang about, didn't Loki die? Didn't he get jettisoned off into space in Thor?
Hmm.
But now he's trying to take over Earth. It's like, oh well, we'll get on with it. It wasn't explained, and
Yeah.
we just get on with it. So I honestly though, Brett, I don't know what you think. I don't know where this ends because it seems to me with all of the callbacks, what we've seen in comics multiple times now is that they have to reboot the universe somehow.
Hmm.
In recent times, DC are older, so if you think that um, let's say obviously there were comics before Superman, but that was the kind of start of the golden age, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
then they create all these universes and whatever, and they just make it so difficult to write stories and have 70 years of legacy to consider. It's like, okay, we'll just simplify everything because we're becoming impenetrable for new
Yeah.
readers. And I kind of feel like the MCU is a bit like that now. So I've praised them because they don't really care with these series about getting anyone new on board
Hmm.
because they don't need any more. But at some point, there's going to be new fans coming through, and I don't know if they're creating this complicated universe which is a bit impenetrable for new people.
Yeah. I mean, just to my wife's point,
Hmm.
it's it was almost 30 films is pretty daunting.
Yeah.
If someone's like, well, if you want to get into this stuff, first you've got to watch 30 films, and then and it might help to have some comic book knowledge too, but then you've got to watch all these series that are connected as well. And they're not in perfect order. There's a certain order you can watch the films in, with the order that they take place, and maybe that'll help. Like it's just way too much. Like I was like trying to get my wife into it. I'm like, oh, let's just start with the first Avenger, right? That's first on the timeline. Let's start
Hmm.
there. It was just when she was like, okay, so after this one, then what? I'm like, well, after this one, there's 22 other films to get through. Like she's like, no way, no, no, I'm good.
See,
It's
I
too
I
much.
would take a different approach. I'd take more like, okay, what kind of films do you like normally? Because
Hmm.
if you're into kind of, a bit of Jason Bourne, bit of James Bond, espionage, spy thrillers, maybe you want something like the Captain America trilogy movies. If you like heist movies, you're into a bit of Ocean's 11 or something like that. Well, maybe watch Ant-Man. If you're into sci-fi movies, let's go to Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think for that gateway drug, I don't think you can start with, okay, there's 30 movies to get through, because
Right.
that's just like, screw that. I'm gonna watch Harry Potter again, or whatever the go-to is. So I think you need to look, because they're all Marvel, but for me they are different genres within that kind of comic book genre.
Very much. And I think that's one of the things that makes them as formulaic as they are, right? That makes them unique. Each one has a different feel, right? So that the Thor films, even within the Thor films, certain Thor films feel wildly different than the other Thor films. You know,
Mm.
the Avengers, the team films feel a lot different than a solo film. And then, yeah, I think that differentiates like the different subsets of the films enough to where, I don't get bored. Um, it doesn't matter that it's hero's journey formulaic because they're giving us different worlds. Guardians of the
Hmm.
Galaxy is a different thing than Captain America. It feels much different. So yeah, I agree with you, and it, it would probably help if I could get get my wife into a specific thing first and just kind of ease her into it. But it's tough. It's tough just knowing because I'm pretty sure she asked the question, like, how many of these are there? And as soon as I said there were 20 something, she was like, no, I don't think this isn't a good idea. I don't have that kind of time. Like, okay. All right.
See, for a lot of our series in the UK, just random things like The Office, say, the first series is 6 episodes, and I
Mhm.
kind of like that. It's very, it's short,
Yeah.
and it's not daunting at all. Whereas if I want to get into an American series, if I wanted to get into the American Office, I'm looking at 20, 30 episodes, like Agents
Yeah.
of Shield. I kind of dropped that, and I kind of want to complete it, just as a bit of a completionist. But it's so
Mhm.
daunting to think, oh Christ, do I really want to go through like 20 odd episodes a season? Probably not. So let me ask you a question then. What kind of movies does your wife like?
Oh man. Things that aren't quite geeky. I don't know. I guess she likes kind of like murder thrillers, stuff like that. Those
Hmm.
type of films more than anything. Comedies, I guess. So maybe an Ant-Man might be better. Like
Mm.
not with the murder thing, but with the comedy element or Thor. Although it's it's tough if you don't know the characters already to get down with a Thor film.
Yeah, and that's the end of a trilogy, isn't it? And it picks up. You've obviously got
Mhm.
Bruce Banner shows up. I mean, that is very much a fantasy sci-fi
Yeah.
adventure, isn't it? So, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think Ant-Man, from what you've said there, might not be a bad start. And does anyone hate Paul Rudd? I mean, I don't know if they do. It's just, and I know he's got his Dorian Gray thing going on and just never ages,
Yeah.
but you got to love a bit of Paul Rudd, haven't you? And so I think that might not be a bad starting point.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's veer back to this episode, finish it up here. We've got the end of this episode is one more final twist, and we've got Thanos has arrived on Earth, and he's a zombie as well. He's got the gauntlet. He's only missing the Mind Stone, and there we are. They're bringing him the Mind Stone now. So, what did you make of that final twist?
It makes me think or wish for a continuation of this story.
Yeah.
Because obviously in our universe that we know, Thanos was obviously, his means were a bit questionable or very questionable, but you kind of felt like you could understand how his mind was working. The get rid of half the universe and then the rest will thrive. Well, a zombie Thanos will surely want to double the resources,
Yeah.
double the amount of people in the universe so that they can munch on more people. So I don't know if they are going to continue this in some way, but or that was just like a little throwaway. Oh, I imagine if zombie Thanos had this and he's almost got all the stones. I don't know. I just again I hope that they're going to continue some of these stories. They're going to play out in other series, hopefully. But yeah, if I was a betting man, I'd say that was just a little bit of a throwaway thing at the end there.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think that's what makes any of these episodes of What If good episodes, is when you at the end you go, I'd like to see more of this world. Like I want it to keep going a little bit. Like I think that is that's gonna be like in the end when I do a round table for this, which I think is gonna be a lot of fun because everyone's gonna have wildly different answers for things. But um, I think that that's what's going to make the episodes. Which ones did you really want them to continue? Which ones did you want to see more of?
I definitely want to see more of Agent Carter.
Yes.
And I don't need to see, a proper Captain Britain. But if Agent Carter is the on-screen version, that would definitely tick my box. Be great
Yeah.
to see Haley Atwell back in the MCU. I don't think I need to see T'Challa as Star-Lord. Obviously, the Hank Pym killing all the Avengers. Yeah, probably not.
Hmm.
Doctor Strange sort of killed himself off there. Maybe an evil Doctor Strange going up against some people. That wouldn't be too bad. And yeah, I wouldn't mind. I don't think they'd do it, and that's more to the point of what I was saying before about you don't want to kill off your kind of marketing potential for your different characters. So I'm not sure we'll
Right.
be seeing too many Marvel zombies things, but yeah, who knows? Definitely. I just I've no idea where this is going, and if all of these different universes do link together in some way. But yeah, I think this one more than any of the other episodes. I would like to see where the story goes.
Yeah, and I agree in the sense that I don't think there's much room for Marvel zombies going forward, but it was sure a fun romp when we got it. Like I really thoroughly enjoyed this. It's made me want to go back and read the source material. And just wrapping things up here, is this the best episode yet? Have they gotten better with every single episode?
I would say so. In my opinion, I think they have got better. I mean, they've got, I think it's 9 episodes, isn't it, in the series? So
Hmm.
I think, I think it would be difficult to top themselves on this one. But again, I think I do love a good zombie apocalypse. So I think, this is probably my favorite episode. But I can imagine like last week was quite interesting. You had a bit of a slide indoors thing, didn't you, with, or Groundhog Day almost with Doctor Strange. So
Hmm.
I think I could see why other people might prefer that episode over this one, but
Yeah,
for me, definitely better each time.
yeah, definitely something for everybody with the What If series. I like that about it. Dave, thank you, my friend. This has been fantastic, and I just love having you on the show. And hopefully, I can get you back. I hope we can get you back for the roundtable because I think that would be interesting to revisit all these episodes in the end.
Absolutely, it'd be awesome, and I do tune in every week as well, so it's always interesting to see what different people have to say. And yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun. It's always great to chat, Brett.
Well, and I know, you know, a lot of people already know you from Comics in Motion or the VHS Strikes Back, but let everybody know kind of where they can find your podcast and what a little bit about it. You don't have to go into super detail. I think people get the gist. Comics in Motion, VHS, but tell us a little bit and
Yeah,
where they can find you.
yeah. So, as you just mentioned, Comics in Motion or the VHS Strikes Back. So, wherever you get your podcasts, we're on all the podcast catchers that I'm aware of. There might be some obscure ones out there that we need to add our RSS feed. I mean, we also have Chris and Dave's reality TV cast as well, which is a bit of a different one. I know we were having a brief exchange, weren't we, Brett? And found out you were a bit of a fan of 90 Day Fiance.
I am, yeah. Yeah.
I think it was one of our guilty little pleasures as well. At the minute, we're going through Married at First Sight, which is just bonkers, and we just love. We don't necessarily buy into it. We like the kind of where we can see the producers are meddling, and it's sort of reality, but in inverted commas, it's sort of fake reality, stage reality, but that's just a lot of fun, and we like to take the piss out of everyone. Also, we're going through the Ricky Gervais original Office, which is 20 years old this year, and that is on Back to the Office, again, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, you are a busy guy, Dave, so I will let you get back to it, pumping out those podcasts. Thanks again for doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Cheers, mate. I'll speak to you again soon.
All right, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know it's not as long as last week. To be honest, Dave and I could probably have talked for a few hours, I'm sure, as we both, always seem to have a lot to say. All the time. Pretty much about everything. But this week, unfortunately, we both were a little crunched for time. We had to fit in the conversation when we could fit it in, between meetings, between work and family stuff. And I'm just happy we got Dave for a full hour to chat. As Dave said, you can check out his podcasts, Comics in Motion, The VHS Strikes Back, and also Chris and Dave's Reality Cast. All the links for those will be in the show notes. Now, a few other things to get to. We got an email from Steve Banvard, who seems to be enjoying What If, but doesn't quite feel the same about Shang-Chi. He doesn't go into too much detail about that, but here, I will read it to you. All right. Brett, as both in praise of What If and not so subtle dig at Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the best thing about this episode is the casual ease in which things are not explained. Why are Captain America and Iron Man together? Did Captain America Civil War not happen in this universe? Why is Scott Lang a floating head? And how does he talk without lungs? Why is Thanos in Wakanda when the Mind Stone was in New Jersey? And at what point did the Mad Titan get the Time Stone? The answer? Who cares? What If is a wacky, fun, and at only 30 minutes of runtime, the episodes do not have time to get bogged down in mind-numbing exposition. And we are all better for it. All right. Thank you, Steve. The input is always appreciated, and while I may not agree with you on Shang-Chi, I appreciate, as you heard last week's episode, hearing from people whose opinions differ from my own, and many of the guests I have on. But yes, I agree wholeheartedly about What If. I was looking forward to this series for a long time, but it's actually way better than I even imagined. So yes. Thank you again, Steve. And hey, guys, I'd love to hear from you as well. Let me know your thoughts on What If, or on Shang-Chi, or on the Matrix trailer, for that matter. Let me know what you think about past shows we've done and past shows that we've covered. Let me know what you think about the podcast. I'm always open to suggestions, criticism, and of course, I'm very, very open to praise and adulation as well. So, yes, Marvel Plus Podcast at gmail.com is the email if you want to chime in. All right, another thing, and this is just a little PSA for my friend and friend of the show, Ryan Fraseri, who has gotten the old Wolverine podcast up and running again. And Now, he's not committed to anything consistent, but I'll tell you, just from talking to him behind the scenes, he seems pretty fired up. But honestly, if he never recorded another show, there's still more than 80 episodes of Wolverine content over there on Talkin' Snikt. So, but I wanted to let you guys know, Ryan is podcasting again, and I couldn't be happier. And I definitely think you should go check out Talkin' Snikt. Oh, also, this is cool. He's changing the show up a little bit, right? In addition to bringing you the wonderful Wolverine-centric content, he's also going to be having guests on to help him break down episodes of X-Men, the animated series, every Saturday. So, not only for Wolverine fans, but X-Men fans in general, go over and favorite, follow, subscribe to Talkin' Snikt, the Wolverine show. And you can get that basically anywhere podcasts are heard as well. All right, one more podcast that you should check out. One that friend of the show, Kurt Schmidt, put me onto just a week or two ago. And that is Rob Liefeld's podcast called Robservations. Now, people usually either love or hate Rob Liefeld. But what's great about his podcast is that it really doesn't have much at all to do with his work in the comic book industry. And it has a lot more to do with comic book history. And this guy has a vast, vast knowledge when it comes to the history of comic books. Like, not only from his lifetime starting in the 70s, but he has soaked up so much knowledge from years before his time. Anyway, I'm not the biggest fan of Rob's art or writing really anyway, but I absolutely love this podcast. I've been binging it all week. So if you're interested in comic book history, do yourself a favor and check out Robservations. Okay, if you enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor, go over and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. That really helps get the show out to more ears. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can reach out on Instagram or Twitter at RealBrettScott, or you can email the show, as I said earlier, at marvelpluspodcast@gmail.com. Also reach out if you're interested in being a guest on the show. Just reach out to one of those. You reach out in one of those three ways. If you're new here, don't forget to favorite or follow the podcast so you get all the new episodes every week as soon as they drop. And if you absolutely, positively love the show and you want more in the way of extra podcasts and bonus content, you can find Marvel Plus on Patreon at patreon.com/Marvel Plus. Also in the show notes. All right, only 4 episodes left, guys. I can't wait to dig into episode 6 with you next week, where, if the trend continues, we'll be getting an even better episode than this fantastic zombies romp that we got this week. Hard to believe, seems impossible, but I have faith. After all, these are the folks that made the Guardians of the Galaxy a household name. As always, I know there are a million Marvel podcasts out there, so it really means a lot to me that you give this one a chance and that you continue to stick around and listen to it each week. Once again, my name is Brett Scott, and this has been Marvel Plus.